How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to another discussions video. Now, today, I get to finally cover a topic that I've had in the polls for a while, and it's been something that I've been wanting to cover since I first released my first discussions video all those months back. It's probably been like a month or two, but I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I've been wanting to talk about the FNAF 3 post-night minigames, because when I was playing through FNAF 3, there were some things that I noticed that I was like, I don't see too many people bringing up. So I just thought it'd be a good video to make to bring up some ideas and stuff that I've noticed that I don't see too many people talking about. So if this theory is correct, it could change the FNAF timeline in a very big way. Maybe. It is kind of hard to change a timeline that doesn't exactly exist, but you know, I still think it'll change our perception of it. Anyway, with that, I must clarify that I am no dedicated theorist, and I may end up missing details or getting stuff wrong, because I'm not perfect, but I just try to bring up ideas that people either gloss over or don't talk about all that much. So if there's anything I missed or that I got wrong, just please let me know in the comments, because I'm always trying to improve, I'm always trying to learn. So I just appreciate it if you guys would let me know if I got something wrong. Anyways, enough about that. Let's just jump right into the video, starting with a brief look at the minigames in question. Alright, just to give a brief recap on what happens in these minigames. For night 1, you play as Freddy, and you just kind of have to walk around and follow Shadow Freddy to the back safe room, where you get attacked by Purple Guy / William Afton, and that's really about it. And the next 3 nights are all the same, except you play as Bonnie, Chica, or Foxy, respectively. And it's just the same thing. On night 5, you play as a crying spirit and proceed to the back room, where you find Purple Guy / William Afton, and after giving him a few scares, he decides to hide in the Spring Bonnie suit and then proceeds to get himself Springlocked because he's not very smart. It's a fairly simple explanation because there's not really all that much that happens. Like, it's fairly self-explanatory, but I thought it would just be good to do a very brief recap on what they are so that we all just kind of have a refresh on what we're looking at. Anyway, with that recap, let's move on to what my potential theory could be. Now that we're refreshed on the minigames, not that there's much to them, let's just talk about what my theory actually is. Just one last thing to get out of the way first. I know I'm kind of pushing it off, but whatever. I'm looking at this from the perspective of the games, because the events in the book trilogy and the movie are very different than what's depicted in the games. So while there can be some crossover, I tend to treat specific events separately since it is depicted very differently. Anyway, what is my theory? I think that William's spring locking, I'm not even sure that's a word, takes place between when the withers were in use, so before they actually became withered, and the events of FNAF 2. Now, this does kind of put William's quote-unquote death quite a bit before when people kind of think it is, though I think it might be an idea covered in MatPat's timeline, but it's been a while since I've seen those, so don't quote me on that. But while I don't think it's perfect, I do think it logically tracks with information given to us in the games. It would also make more sense for William to have been Springlocked before FNAF 2 if we actually play as Michael Afton in FNAF 2, but I'll get into that more later. Anyways, I've got a few pieces of evidence to support my theory, so with that, let's get into the first bit of evidence, which actually isn't the minigames, but in fact, one of the phone calls from FNAF 3. While I was researching for this video, I went back through and listened to some of the Phone Guy vintage training tapes and found some interesting stuff. In the calls, Phone Guy talks about the Springlock suits, and then later talks about how they're being recalled and retired because they're dangerous, And then after that, he talks about how people can't be messing around in the back safe room and that you can't really be hanging out in there and don't move around the suits and all that kind of stuff. And then in the next phone call, he talks about how the safe rooms are being sealed off because of budget restrictions and whatever excuse Fazbear decided to come up with. But Ryan, we know all this already. What's so special about this? Well, if the phone call tapes are all from the same location and from the same time-ish, which we don't know for sure, but it definitely makes more sense if they were all from the same location and place, then these would be from the first Freddy's location as mentioned in the phone calls. This is most likely the same location that the Wizards would be from before they were withered, since they were the first animatronics aside from the Springlocked suits. So if the tapes are from a location called Freddy's and not Fredbear's, had Springlocked suits, and still use them from time to time, then this would most likely be the location that was open prior to the FNAF 2 location opening in 1987. And if the sealing of the safe rooms happened at this location, and we know William was stuck in the safe rooms, that's why they sealed it, then we know that he has to have been sealed away at the Wither's original location before FNAF 2 even opened, since that's what would logically track with the phone calls. I know that this is a bit rambly, but I do think the phone calls tell us that William was sealed away before the Wizards even became withered, and that it was at this old Freddy's location. But what other evidence is there to tell us that this is from the first Freddy's location and not the location from FNAF 1? Well, let's take a look at the minigames again. So the minigames themselves tell us, or I guess show us, most of what we really need to know. It's just not all that clear. Let's start with the animatronic sprites. The first thing I noticed was that they didn't look like the FNAF 1 gang, but more like the Wizards. Gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I've had to say Withered in this video, I'd be a stinging millionaire. Anyways, the two most obvious details are the buttons on Freddy and Bonnie, which only the Wizards had at this time, since the FNAF 1 gang don't have the buttons on their torso, only the Wizards have those. Another interesting sprite detail is that Foxy looks more complete and fixed up, rather than having solid red legs. Now this could just be an ease of design creation, but Scott could have just made the legs gray, and then he would have looked more like Foxy, so I think that there is a key detail difference here. Moving on to the background location, it's old, worn down, leaking, and has rats all over the place. However, I always thought it was weird that they still look like they're open. Like they have party supplies out on the tables, and there's animatronic parts in the parts and service room. Like it still looks like it's open, which doesn't really make much sense if the place is supposed to be abandoned. Like if it really was abandoned, you wouldn't think that they would just leave all that stuff around. You would think that they would take all the stuff out, or at least take the important part, like all the important stuff out, and not just leave everything all over the place. Because we know Fazbear, they like to make things cheap, so they would just reuse everything. But it would make more sense if the place was open for business, and that's why they have all this stuff out. Now, kind of like what I just said, Fazbear Entertainment is notorious for being cheap and not necessarily being clean, so it's no stretch of the imagination to think that Fazbear would run a dump location like this and just say, hey, we're still open for business, and it looks like an utter crap pile, since they are definitely not known for their cleanliness. So I think that this location is still open, which, coupled with the phone calls from earlier, would explain why the safe rooms were sealed off. If this location was truly abandoned, why would they seal the safe room off? It just doesn't make sense to have it be like, oh, William gets springlocked, he's stuck sitting in the back in an abandoned location. Like Fazbear wouldn't even go there. Why would they seal off the room? Unless it was still open for business. Because if it's a bad company just trying not to lose business, because that's what Fazbear does, and an employee shows up opening for work. They're doing their job. They walk right in there. They're like, oh, I don't get paid enough for this crap. And then they look at the safe room, and there's a stinking dude in a Springlocked suit freaking out in there. Fazbear would just steal it off and just stay open for business and be like, oh, nothing's happening. That just seems like something that Fazbear would do, and kind of logically tracks with me. Like, the building looks like a dump, but it seems like it's still open for business. Oh, I also almost forgot to mention, but yes, it does look like the FNAF 1 location, but there are key differences. For example, we don't have where, like, the closet where Bonnie walks into in the left hallway. That's not on the map. There doesn't even look like to be a kitchen on the map. So there are some differences compared to the FNAF 1 location. So what I'm guessing happened is that Fazbear, who likes to save money, probably had this location open with the Wizards. After that location closed because of whatever the heck they do, they move over to the FNAF 2 location. And then when that one fails, they go, oh crap, we need another location. Oh, well, we still own this old building. Oh, let's just go over there and renovate it, and we'll just refurbish it, and it'll be good as new. And then that's what becomes the FNAF 1 location. So they kind of fix it up a bit, and then that way it's the same building, just used for 2 different restaurants, kind of a thing. Now, this theory does both fit and go against other big theories, such as playing as Michael Afton in FNAF 2 and there being a second missing children's incident. It would make the most amount of sense to have William steal away before FNAF 2 if we play as Michael in that game, because to me, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if William is still out at this location going after some kids, and then his son also works at the same location. Like, would they cross paths in the Freddy's parking lot? Like, Michael's coming in for his shift at 12 a.m. and William's leaving there because he just finished his work there, and they like pass each other out of the parking lot. Like, it just doesn't really make much sense in my opinion. So what does make sense is if William's already been sealed away before this, and then we play as Michael in that game, because then there's no like weird crossing paths because they work at the same location. On the other hand, my theory does contradict the second missing children's incident, though I tend to believe that there isn't one. Though I'll save this for its own video, since the missing children's incident 2 can be a pretty big can of worms on its own, so that's going to be its own theory video at some point in the future. I know people are going to talk about the book trilogy and the movie, but like I said before, those events in those stories are drastically different in the game. The biggest being William's springlocking scenes. The scenes depicted in the movie and book trilogy are similar to each other, but are very different in the games. So I tend to not use those to help explain the game since they are so very different. However, I do understand that this isn't like the most backed up theory, but I hope you all still take this into consideration, because the point of these videos are to get people talking about this kind of stuff. So if there's any solid evidence against my theory or more evidence that supports my theory, I just want people to, at least think about this, so people can construct their own idea and, I don't know, just kind of make their own thoughts about this kind of stuff, bring new information into the theory community that people don't always talk about. So to summarize up this video, I think that the post-night minigames actually take place at the Freddy's location that was open prior to the location in FNAF 2. The way the animatronics look, mixed with the dialogue from Phone Guy, seems to point to William being springlocked earlier than some people think he was. I think this also helps solve timeline issues, such as Henry still being alive in the late 2020s, possibly 2030s, to fit in with like Pizza Sim and stuff. It does make Sister Location's placement a bit more tricky, but that one's always up in the air anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. While this theory is not perfect, no theory ever is, and I do think it tracks with what is shown to us in the games. Anyways, that is going to be it for today's discussion video. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on this theory in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like if you agreed, disagreed, or just enjoyed the video. Subscribe to see more discussions and gaming about FNAF and other horror franchises. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and comment, it's in the books if you made it this far in the video. See you next time.